Welcome. We're really excited for this pop-up. And first and foremost, we wanted to thank you very much for being here, because we know this is a crazy busy time of year and this is a crazy year in itself. So we want to thank you so much for trusting us with your time. We promise to make it worth your while. And before we begin, it's worth mentioning that we're presenting this as a learning that we've recently done ourselves, and as something that we see great value in for students and educators alike. And we are in no way suggesting that you must do it, nor is it any kind of initiative mandated by anybody or anything like that. It's just, we thought it was really cool and we see great value in it. We hope you do too. And our job as shift coaches is to sort of find and share ways of innovating teaching and learning. And so this model does just that. And we hope it speaks to you as it did to us. We think that you'll really find it appealing for a number of reasons. And as always, we're here to support you along the way. Hey, Matt, we encourage you to keep an open mind, and how might we in this sort of yes and stance and attitude, and as you follow along with us tonight.
So in case you don't know who we are the Shift team. We are the innovation coaches for the Halton District School Board. My name is Matt.
Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Sarah.
And we love to try, fail, learn, shift, and play.
So as such, let's play. So this is just a very quick game. All you have to do is, this is called Two Kinds of People. Put in the chat, which one are you, A or B? Do you like your sandwiches sliced down the middle or across in a vertical line? B, ooh, lots of B's.
Ooh.
B, 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 B. Woo, interesting. It's always interesting to see how this splits, so to speak.
Well done, well done.
Thank you.
What did you say earlier about stand-up?
Okay, so another one, X or O. Which one are you? Wrapping gifts. Look at all the B's. I'm so surprised. That's so cool. Neither, Meredith. A, B, more B. Oh, this is B. So X or O in this one. X or O.
Perfectly wrapped or just get it covered? Which camp are you in?
Wrapped. Obviously perfectly wrapped. No wrapping. Ooh, gift bags. Good one.
I'm firmly in O. Just cover the damn thing.
I like reusable stuff. And craft paper, yes. Okay, this is the only one with a correct answer and a definitely wrong answer. You already know. Everybody knows. Which one is the right one? Look at everybody go. Obviously.
Chat's exploding.
Beautiful.
Amazing. So before we introduce our guest speaker for this evening, I just want to draw your attention to the Q&A feature that we've enabled for you in this Google Meet this evening. So we know the chat is going to be fast and furious, just even by doing that simple little game right now. And so we don't want to miss any questions that you might have for Kareem as we go along. So if you go to the Activities tab, it's down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, the triangle, square, and circle. And you click on that, and you can then click on the Q&A. You can add your questions in here, so that you can add your question by clicking on the blue button down in the corner that says Ask a Question. Or if your question's already there, upvote it, because the ones that get upvoted are going to pop up to the top, and we're probably going to look at some of the more popular questions when we get to that portion of the evening. We also know that as you registered, you did submit your questions, so we haven't forgotten about them. We are going to come back to those too. We anticipate a lot of them might get answered during Kareem's presentation to this evening, but feel free to add them to the Q&A here as well as we go. So without further ado, we'd like to introduce Kareem Farah. So Kareem Farah and his colleague Robert Barnett met as math teachers at a Title I high school in Washington, D.C. And facing chronic absenteeism and a wide range of skill levels within each class, they worked together to develop an instructional model that would empower every student, regardless of background, ability, or attendance, to master key content and skills. And then in the summer of 2018, they trained their first cohort of 8 Modern Classroom Fellows. And inspired by that cohort's success, as well as the interest of fellow educators worldwide, they left the classroom to run the Modern Classrooms project full-time. So to date, Kareem and his team have empowered thousands of educators worldwide through their innovative virtual mentorship program and their comprehensive free online course. Their teacher-led movement really does continue to grow every day. And so we're so excited to have Kareem here with us tonight to share this game-changing model with us as we look ahead to a modern classroom beyond COVID. So I am going to turn it over to Kareem now. Welcome, Kareem.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I got to say, at 7 p.m. on a Thursday night, I don't think I've ever been on a presentation with this much energy. So it makes me feel incredibly hopeful about the future. It's been such a challenging year. So to see so many educators jumping on just to learn about something innovative and cool that may not even actually work all that well is inspiring. And I'm super, super excited to be here to share the model with everyone. And Sarah, thank you, or Rachel, thank you for the intro. I mean, it was very kind. To give a little bit more context on my background, I was an educator for years, as Rachel mentioned, and taught in really high-need environments and was truly just troubled by my inability to support a high diversity of learning levels and social-emotional needs. I was particularly troubled by my inability to work with students experiencing trauma. I felt that the traditional model of teaching, one where I was at the front of the room telling kids to sit in their seats and listen to me at the beginning of class, kind of came in direct conflict with my students who are walking into my class experiencing emotional distress, and realized that that kind of one-size-fits-all approach just wasn't what was best for my students. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to screen share. I'm going to talk reasonably fast, but I promise it's recorded and you'll have the slides. The reason why I'm going to talk reasonably fast is because I want to get to questions, because there's so many of you on here, and it sounds like there's already questions in there that I would love to get to questions as soon as possible. So I'm going to screen share. I'm going to give everyone a rundown of the model, what we do, why we do it, our nonprofit, how it works, how you can access our resources, and then I will kick it to the group to just fire questions at me, and I will answer as many as I possibly can during the session. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Bear with me. I hope this works correctly. Can you all see my slides? Someone just say yes. Rachel, give me a yes or no, because I can't see you.
I can see them now. They're coming up.
Perfect. Fantastic.
There you
So
go.
just so everyone knows, this tiny URL right here has these slides. They'll appear at the end, so don't worry about losing the information. It will come back. I title this deck A Blueprint for a Path Forward. The reason why is because I think that this is a very unique moment in time for teaching and learning. I think for years we've been stuck in a rut of largely relying on traditional practices. COVID sort of shocked our system and created an environment that was extremely difficult for educators, for students, and everyone else in between. But I do think it's an opportunity for us to move forward and move beyond traditional teaching. So we've framed sort of our messaging that way, and I hope that this model can kind of provide a look into what teaching and learning can look like moving forward in a really digestible way. Just to give a background on our organization, first of all, we're a nonprofit. I started this organization after leaving the classroom. I had never, ever intended to leave the classroom. I love teaching from the bottom of my heart. But when I built this model and won a few awards in the DC area where I implemented it, I realized that there was a real demand and appetite from educators across the country and the world to learn instructional approaches that challenge traditional norms. So I decided to launch the nonprofit just to provide educators with an opportunity to think about teaching and learning differently. And what I want to stress here is that ultimately most traditional models of teaching and learning aren't designed to respond to kids' needs. Instead, kids have to adapt and respond to the way the instructional environment's built. And naturally, that's not particularly effective when you're dealing with students who are just experiencing extenuating circumstances. So our model is designed to really think about how we can build responsive classrooms and infuse self-paced, mastery-based instruction through technology with the goal of really fostering human connection and authentic learning. So really not putting kids on screens and allowing them to learn in silos and all that kind of stuff, but instead thinking about how technology can leverage true connection between student and educator and student to student. So why did we build this? Well, I was an educator. I stood at the front of the room like I was told to and taught to. And I would deliver lectures at the beginning of each of my classes. And what I quickly realized was my on-grade level and present kids were saying, this is too easy. I'm bored and I want to be pushed. They were the kids whose heads went down first, actually. My absent students were saying, I can't catch up. In fact, I have no idea what you're talking about, and the packet you left at the front of the office is certainly not replacing the 2 to 3 lessons that I missed. My students that were classified as below proficient, which I don't even know what that really means, but those students were constantly saying, I'm lost. I wish I had more one-on-one and small group time. Can you just slow down? And I'm sitting at the front of the room thinking, what exactly am I doing wrong? Because I think I'm doing everything I was told to do, and it's clearly not working for the vast majority of my students. I then went from classroom to classroom one year. I visited as many peer teachers as possible, particularly veterans, and I asked, are you all experiencing the same problems? And I witnessed them in action. And they, of course, said yes, but then when I asked if they had a solution, they all said no. And that's when I realized educators across the country and the world are experiencing the same challenges, and naturally there has to be an opportunity to think of something new and different. And what I was committed to doing, and what I think speaks to what your shift coach just said at the beginning of this, is not a model that's forced on folks. Not a model that requires a school or a district or community to adopt it in every single classroom, but instead something any educator in any classroom at any time can think about implementing. So what are our goals as an organization? We focus on reshaping teacher experience. I swear I probably sat through 100 PDs that told me the new and innovative way my students' test scores were going to go up or attendance was going to go up. And I always sat there thinking, I have no idea how to make my life sustainable, so how in the world are you just going to suddenly magically increase my students' test scores and attendance? So our goal is to really think about reshaping teacher experience. How do we make sure that your all's experience in the classroom feels effective, feels efficient, and that you can leverage technology the right way? And in turn, we know when that happens, you will reshape student experience, cultivate classrooms that actually respond to students' needs and meet each student's needs effectively. Now, I usually, and feel free to use the chat function, although I can't see it in presenter mode, but I'm kind of curious. So just go ahead and answer this question in the chat just because I'm curious to check it out later. I always ask folks when I'm in presentations and in conferences, what's the greatest challenge with blended learning, infusing technology in the classroom? The reason why I ask this question is because I think really interesting answers come up. I usually hear things like tech challenges, building routines, academic integrity. I also hear things like there's poor curriculum, lack of support, too much screen time. I could probably sit here and list about 100 more. But what I found really interesting in asking this question to a lot of stakeholders is I rarely heard the answer that I realized was the most challenging, which is teacher authenticity. Every study shows that teachers are the most important factor in student learning. But when you see technology implemented at scale in schools and communities, oftentimes it erodes at teacher authenticity. Essentially, the tech tools are designed, or the platforms are designed to actually remove the teacher from the equation, which is obviously crazy when you know that the teacher is the most important factor in student learning. So my first message to everyone is to remember that blended instruction doesn't need to be pretty. It actually just needs to be personal. When we think about introducing technology into classrooms and having students leveraging technology to access their learning, the part that you have to be very careful about losing is your authenticity and your personal connection with kids. Naturally, we need to use the technology to increase communication student to student and student to teacher, and also ensure that they feel like they're learning from you, the most important factor in learning. So what's our actual model? Well, our model is a 3-part approach. It's blended, self-paced, mastery-based. And I swear, about a year and a half ago, these were all interesting topics, but apparently all 3 of these terms are now thrown around at scale all the time. So what I will tell everyone when we built this model 3.5 years ago is each of the buckets that we put together, first of all, naturally tie together, but also we do each bucket quite differently than what's out there already, as far as I know. And I'm going to go through each bucket to kind of really dig in and understand what the model is. There's also an Edutopia video that you probably have seen popping around, and that's a great way to see the model in action as well. And if you're teaching younger students, because that Edutopia video is my classroom and a history classroom at the secondary levels, I just want everyone to know we're actually filming our next Edutopia video this September and October in our elementary classrooms. So folks will be able to get to see that in action. But there's thousands of educators at the younger grade levels using our model at scale. So let's talk about blended instruction. What do we do with blended instruction? Well, the first goal that we realized was that whole class lectures, that live delivery of information is actually the bottleneck of most innovation in classrooms. If every single day kids have to sit and listen to a teacher deliver information live, well, naturally, you can't infuse self-pacing, you can't spend as much time as you'd like individually in small groups, and it's a very restrictive learning environment. So our educators eliminate whole class lectures. Now, I want to stress the fact that this is not whole full group discussions. These are not science labs. These are not Paideia seminars and fishbowl discussions. Anything that's student-to-student communication we encourage and see every day in our classrooms. It's those moments in time where kids are taking notes, teachers delivering information at the front of the room, and that can be replaced because we don't think it's a great use of your time or students' time. The key distinguishing factor for what we do is we, from the beginning, said, you can't replace a teacher's instruction with some sort of video you find online. You actually need to empower teachers to build their own instructional videos and resources. Now, that's not to say every single time a student watches a video, it has to be their own teacher. But ultimately, if we want to maintain our strong relationships with kids, if we want to make sure that our content's aligned to our kids' needs, you, the educator, have to be the drivers behind the planning experience. And that's why we believe deeply that instructional video creation by educators is critical. And that's actually supported by the research. Instructional videos that are creative, that are personal, even just instructional videos where a face or a hand that is a student's own teacher appears, they're more likely to listen to the video and engage. So we like to think of ourselves as helping teachers clone themselves so they're more available. I don't know a single teacher on the planet who hasn't said that they never have enough time to accomplish what they want to accomplish. And this is a small step in that direction. The next phase is self-pacing. A lot of folks who first come in contact with our model become attached to the blended learning piece. It's kind of the part that pops. It's technology. It's building your own videos. But I actually think self-paced structures where really things get interesting because everyone knows that people learn things at different paces. We all know that babies learn how to walk at different times. We all know that you shouldn't learn how to sprint before you know how to walk. We all know that kids are all different. Some kids are experiencing unique challenges. Other kids are flying through content. So we all know self-pacing is probably how people should learn, but the challenge is how do you actually run a classroom that way? So once you've eliminated lectures, now you can unleash self-pacing. So in our classrooms, students are self-paced within each unit of study. I stress that because the first thing we want to be careful of is not over self-pacing a classroom. It is an unrealistic idea that you could put a kid in a classroom and say, hey, you're just going to self-pace for 9 months at a time. Students need to kind of strengthen their self-direction and 21st century skills and self-management. We need to create clear guardrails and structures for them. So in our classrooms, we talk about chunked self-pacing, 3 weeks at a time, 2 weeks at a time, even 1 week at a time. So naturally, you're probably thinking, great, but then what happens if kids don't actually get through all the skills? So in addition to that, every lesson in a modern classroom is actually classified as either must do, should do, or aspire to do. So I often use the example of a student experiencing trauma. They've missed 30% of the classes during a unit. Well, that student might just focus on must do lessons. They feel like they can be successful. Those are the most important lessons to travel to the next unit. Well, a student sitting right next to them might be mastering all 3 classifications. So that allows you to create these personalized pathways within each unit. Now, I always tell folks there's a key distinguishing factor between doing our model well. It's the distinguishing factor between controlled chaos and complete chaos. Every teacher wants to create a controlled, chaotic environment, and every teacher is living in fear of complete chaos. I certainly did myself. So one of the best ways to make sure that your classroom is actually experiencing a certain level of control that we want to see is actually building effective trackers. So these can be game boards, these can be public trackers. We actually have about 15 in our courses that you can use, make a copy of, and modify that are designed to create the structures necessary. So if I'm a student in a modern classroom, I know exactly where I'm at in the unit and where I should be, and the same goes for the teacher. Final frontier, mastery-based grading. Mastery-based grading, competency-based grading, standards-based grading, these are all concepts that have been thrown around for some time in education. And I always tell folks, it never gets past the theory stage. Everyone's talking about how you deconstruct a standard and what constitutes mastery, but you actually rarely see classrooms where students don't go from one lesson to the next until they've achieved mastery on the previous one. So we focus on that delivery side. We don't talk about curriculum all that often. We don't provide a curriculum. We don't tell teachers to change their curriculum. Instead, we focus on what systems and structures need to exist in the classroom to run a mastery-based classroom, and how you do that quickly and efficiently. And it first starts with blending your instruction and actually creating self-pacing. And then finally, it's all about building mastery checks, bite-sized assessments at the end of each lesson that allows you to measure mastery quickly. Does this kid actually understand how to write a thesis statement, or do they not? If they do, fabulous, go on to the next lesson. If they do not, it's time to revise. It's time to reassess, and then it's also time to reflect on that journey. So really thinking about what criteria and policies need to exist in your classroom to actually engage in constant revision, reassessment, reflection. So that's the model in a nutshell. Now, no one should listen to me just talk about a model and then say, cool, I'll adopt it without actually knowing if there are some real impacts. So we actually are partnered with Johns Hopkins School of Education here in the Baltimore area, and they do all of our research for us. And we did a control study back in 2019-2020 on 55 teachers and 1,900 students. We really tried to use some rigorous measures here, and we surveyed students and teachers in a control group and the actual implementation group. On the student end, across the board, statistically significant gains. Students can teach themselves new things more, learn how to use technology more, get more personal support and encouragement, and they're more responsible for their own learning. So exciting gains here. I was a teacher for years, and I understand certainly when you give students a survey, some kids actually take it seriously and some kids just click buttons. So we really just wanted to see general positive increases here. But what was much more profound was what we saw on the teacher end. Teachers were just significantly better at helping students catch up, serve all learning levels, teach effective study skills, and most importantly, work closely with their students during class. I've said for years that ultimately differentiation is the most overused and under-executed term in education. We believe we're an actual differentiation model. And that's what the report says. There's support for the model with strongest effects on differentiated instruction. I also will never hang my hat on test scores. I just don't know to what degree it's a particularly effective measure. And it certainly depends on the student population, the tests being given, all that kind of stuff. But we do have a case study out of Michigan, actually, where a district implemented our model at a 60% implementation level, essentially most of their educators during our model, and they saw really big gains in their test scores, particularly in their K math scores. So I just wanted to show this just so folks know that we're measuring this as well, and we're seeing really positive indicators. The last thing I want to talk about, which I just think is really, really important, is we're seeing a lot of burnout on the educator front nationally at the moment. It's no surprise. I mean, the last year has been just brutal. But one of the things I always tell folks is educators seem to burn out quite often when they don't feel like they have a vision for what teaching and learning can look like in the future, and they certainly don't feel successful in the classroom. Now, right before I built this model, I was about to burn out. In fact, I was riding the subway home from my school in DC, and I looked out the window, and I had just tried to run a classroom where multiple students had just experienced immense amounts of trauma, and I felt like that was working against me, and I felt horrible about my practice. I didn't understand how my students' trauma was actually working against me, and I wasn't supporting them effectively. So I decided I was either going to toss everything I was doing in the classroom and rethink teaching and learning, or I was going to quit, and I was on the verge of burning out. And it wasn't until I built this model that I felt like I could actually be successful in the classroom. And this is what we're seeing from our teachers. They're enjoying the classroom more, they're finding it more sustainable, more likely to stay in this profession, more optimistic, and they're really committed to implementing the model. Now, this is kind of the perfect time to start exploring these ideas. We know that students ultimately are returning back to buildings with a greater diversity of academic and social emotional needs than ever before. We can debate endlessly about what quote unquote learning loss means. I don't think it's worth our time. Instead, we just know the realities of the moment, which is some kids fell off the map and some kids are doing just fine and they'll be sitting right next to each other. So we really have to think about creating classrooms that personalize instruction to meet students' needs. And we think our model is getting us in the right direction. So how can we support you? Well, there's a couple ways. The first is our free online course. Now, our free online course is currently where about 27,000 teachers are. There's also a Facebook group with about 5,500 teachers. And these educators have all joined the course within the last 12 to 14 months. And we've actually made a course just for your district and school board because we wanted to clean it of any tools and resources that you all don't currently have. So here's a link. It'll appear at the end again. But this is one of the fastest, easiest ways to just get exposure to the model. Now, if you don't like my voice and you find me annoying, do not join the free course because I made every video in there. But hopefully that won't be a problem. And it's a great way to understand every single component of the model. We are a nonprofit, which means we don't hide things from people. We share everything we can publicly. And the only things we actually charge for are people's time. So we run a virtual mentorship program as well, where if you're a teacher anywhere in the country or the world and you want to get that really detailed support from a mentor, you can do that. I'm going to talk about that very briefly now, and then it's question time. I swear I'm almost done. So if folks actually want to learn more about the mentorship program, the way that works is if you're a 6th grade math teacher or a 7th grade English teacher or a 12th grade science teacher, and you want to go through our program and learn this model in a really comprehensive way, well, you actually join the program, you get paired with a real mentor. These are real educators who currently do this model and have been credentialed by the Modern Classrooms Project, meaning they've done our Distinguished Modern Classroom Educator credential and then completed our Mentoring Academy. So these educators are some of the best implementers of our model, and they're your one-on-one support as you actually build your own modern classroom. And what you're doing during the mentorship program is you're submitting these 5 assignments. You're creating mastery checks, instructional videos, a self-pacing plan, a learning design plan, and a final submission. So the time commitment usually takes folks about 25 to 30 hours, but almost all of that's asynchronous. There's just 3 usually synchronous hours that we encourage folks to go to. The goal is to have you leave with all the systems and structures you need for Modern Classroom plus 3 additional lessons. It's a self-paced and mastery-based PD. We would not be the Modern Classrooms Project if it wasn't. And folks usually learn this model either through the summer or during the school year. We give folks longer time during the school year because obviously you all are busy with your classes. So I'm done talking. Well, I'll answer any questions folks have, but I'm done with my presentation. I want you all to see the 3 resources here as well as the slide deck. learn.modernclassrooms.org/courses/HDSB. That's where you can access that online course just for you all that's free. Go to our website as well, and then here are the slides. I am going to stop there and start answering questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kareem.
Of course.
I know that was a lot of information about something totally new. And don't worry, we will be sharing all the links at the end. So let's just get the other wheel. So go ahead, Matt.
Okay, so this spring we actually we supported a couple of cohorts of educators going through the free course together. It was new to us. We took the free course, and here are a couple awesome educators right here in Halton sharing their experience with initiating self-pacing into their practice after taking the free course. We want to thank them so much for taking the time to share these amidst report card writing and end of year wrap up and with such short notice. A number of the questions you shared in the registration related to what this model looks like in elementary. So here's a bit of a taste. First up, we have Christy Pocock, who tried the model in her grade 3 class.
I tried the self-paced classroom this spring virtually with grade 3 students, and we did a descriptive writing unit. At the end, I had students fill out a feedback form, and I was pleasantly surprised that 75% of them chose this as their preferred way of learning. And specific feedback was they liked the videos. The videos were entertaining, and they liked the fact that they could pause or go back and rewatch videos. I like that fact too because it was easy for me to direct them back to the slide deck and to the videos for their revisions if they needed them for their mastery check. In terms of challenges, it was a tremendous amount of work preparing it, but so worth it, absolutely worth it. Having the time to work with small groups and individual students during the school day while the rest of the students were working on something truly engaging and essential, it was gold. So I highly recommend it.
And next up we have Stacy Falconer. She tried the model with her grade 4 to 6 self-contained class. Let's have a look.
I have a self-contained class, and the Modern Classroom Project allows me to differentiate, for the first time probably, truly differentiate for all different IEPs that are running within the class. If you ask the students, they know exactly what they're working on, and they actually ask me for Aspire to-dos if I forget to give them one, because they all want to become a master. So increased engagement, independence, their own goal setting, my ability to differentiate. I could go on, but I was asked to keep it short and sweet. Truly a game changer.
So again, lots of information. It's kind of, I always liken it to like a kitchen renovation when everything's like ripped down and you're kind of standing there and you're staring at this thing going like, this is going to be a kitchen. And like, you can't see until the little pieces get put into place. So if this is how you're feeling about any aspect of this so far, fear not, we've got you collectively. So we're going to do the best we can to answer as many questions as possible. And inevitably, we won't be able to probably get to all of them this evening unless you want to stay till midnight. But it doesn't mean that you can't get your questions answered at all. We are just an email away, and we're happy to continue answering questions and supporting you however we need. And Kareem is so responsive as well. So we will dive into some questions. And we did collect some before, and I see that most of them are also repeated here. So we'll just dive into the Q&A there. So Kareem, mastery-based grading question. And a lot of this, you know, this is where people's brains kind of goes, how about all these little details, which come up in the free course. But mastery-based grading, every teacher builds mastery checks, like exit tickets for lessons. Step 2, she missed it. Oh. Missed step 2 after mastery-based grading.
Say again? Can you clarify the question?
Yeah, so I guess it's around mastery-based grading. What does it look like? There are a few questions about how it translates into a grade from a mastery check to a grade.
Well, okay. I can answer this a few ways. I think folks actually have overcomplicated the concept of mastery-based grading. And I actually think it's a consequence of the literature. Like the first mastery-based grading group I was ever in was a Facebook group, and I left it in like 7 minutes because the amount of chaos and just like obsession around all these different intricate elements drove me insane. So what I always tell folks first is that all we're saying is a student doesn't go from one lesson to the next because of the day of the week. They go from one lesson to the next because they understand it. Now, how you measure how they understand it is actually up to you. And I would trust yourself because there's a lot of different ways to measure understanding. Your mastery check can be a conversation. It can be a half-sheet piece of paper where kids answer questions. They could be playing a note on a musical instrument. They could build a video of themselves doing something. Every single mastery check can look different. And when you think about your grade book, it's not all that complicated. When I open up a traditional grade book right now, I often see things like 6s out of 10s and 4s out of 10s and 3s out of 10s and 9s out of 17s. And frankly, I don't know what they mean, and nor does the student usually, because I have no idea what 40% of an assignment is, other than the fact that you did some of it. So if you open up one of our grade books, you might see 10 lessons, and you might see mastery checks and assignments. But every single grade is either a 0 or 100. Or if mastery in your classroom is a 90%, then every grade's either a 90%, a 95%, a 100%, or a 0. So when a student masters 7 out of 10 skills, they got a 70% in the class, as opposed to having a surface level understanding of each. And when you think about the functional experience of this, well, in my classroom, I actually sat at a table in the middle of the room. And that's basically where I spent all my time. And then when I didn't have any questions or wasn't grading mastery checks, I would then just wander and talk to kids. So whenever a kid would complete their assignment, they'd grab a mastery check. They usually sat right around me. They completed that mastery check in silence. I'd review it and grade it. They'd be going on to the next lesson. If they did great, I'd say, perfect, you've mastered the skill. If you have not mastered the skill, I'd call them back down and say, look, you didn't master the skill. I'll give you a quick reteach, and then you're going to go get a new mastery check. That's a different question, different concept, and you're going to go try to repeat that skill and execute it effectively. So that's actually what the classroom looks like. Now, a lot of teachers struggle to say, well, how do I have time for that? Well, you're no longer lecturing. You're no longer at the front of the room. So you're actually spending almost all of your class time in small groups grading and delivering feedback at scale. So hopefully that answers the question, but maybe it didn't. I'm not sure.
So this is an HDSB specific question, and maybe Rachel with a combination of Kareem, but Kareem, best technology to use to make effective lessons. And then it goes into, is HDSB open to supporting teachers who want to try this with technology? So that might be that's kind of a board level question, but what do you recommend in terms of technology? Does it need to be fancy?
It does need to be fancy. Does not. So First, the best resource, I mean, the free course is always the best resource to learn about the different tools and the tutorials. There's also a 3-part series that I wrote with the Cult of Pedagogy. If anyone knows the Cult of Pedagogy, she is fabulous. And one of them was on building a screencast, the next on self-paced learning, and the final one was on mastery-based grading. Those are probably the longest pieces I've personally ever written about it. So when you think about instructional video creation, there's kind of 2 brands. Brand 1 is you do it on your computer like a laptop or a desktop. Brand 2 would be that you do it on a touch screen. If you're using a laptop or a desktop, all you need is a basic screencaster. We're talking Screencastify, Screencast-O-Matic, Loom. I mean, honestly, Zoom can do it in some ways. The key there when you're using a computer like that is you really want to make sure that you're actually spending most of your time on the slide creation, which is the most popular way to build it. So making sure that those slide decks are interactive, that they're animations. I mean, frankly, the slide deck that was put up today by Sarah, Matt, and Rachel, I mean, it's a perfect example of a very interactive slide deck, right? You can imagine that being turned into an instructional video. If you are doing this on an iPad or a touchscreen device, our favorite tool by far is Explain Everything. It's actually quite cheap, and it is an incredible tool for being able to annotate and basically draw on top of slides. So if you build a worksheet or a slide deck or a guided notes, you just drop it into Explain Everything, and suddenly you can write all over it and record a video. It's fabulous. And then the last thing I'll say is when you're building instructional videos, one of the most popular things to use is what we call it a video enhancer, which is usually Edpuzzle, sometimes something like PlayPosit, which allows you to put actual questions in your videos. So I'm a kid, and every 30, 40 seconds or a minute or two, a question pops up, and they have to answer that question, and then you can see that data on the back end. I mean, essentially, it's an actual check for understanding as opposed to one kid out of 25 answering a question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we went through the free course as well, and we looked at it in terms of our software catalog and making sure that we're pulling out resources that are not approved for our board. So we've gone through and done that, but we've got Screencastify. We have our subscription to it. So like that's an amazing tool for creating videos, like Kareem was saying. So you know, we do have the tools, and like he said, doesn't need to be fancy. And if anybody wants support around any of the tools, like feel free to email us and hit us up. We can definitely support there.
Screencastify is the easiest to use, by the way. So that's great that you'll have that.
Mm-hmm. There are a few questions about, obviously, time, as you mentioned, Kareem. How much time do teachers spend creating their content? Like, how long does it roughly take to set up a course like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's so contingent on what you know going in, the types of resources and materials you have. You know, I always tell folks, like, the most time-consuming part is the planning, not the recording of the instructional video, the actual creation of the slide decks and the content. So if tomorrow I handed you a USB drive and you're a grade 7 teacher in a content area, and I gave you all the slide decks and all the guided notes, and all you had to do was build the instructional videos, that wouldn't take you very long. Recording an instructional video when all the resources are created takes 20, 30 minutes, especially when you get used to it. But if you don't have those resources formatted correctly, that's a pretty long exercise. So it takes some intensive planning. But what I always say is it's purposeful planning. When I was planning traditionally, it felt like I was pouring my heart into something that wasn't actually making a difference. The other thing I'd say is it never goes away. So I always tell folks I built a nonprofit while my 3rd year implementing this model because I had already built the model in my classroom. So the only things I was doing was making slight changes to it. So yeah, is it a lot of work on the front end? Certainly. But its payoffs are real. And if you want to start small, start with one prep, start with one content area, start with one unit. If you're teaching the younger students, just focus on math instruction or just focus on writing instruction and then go from there. And you'll see the benefits at scale for sure. And once you start seeing the benefits, I am warning you, you will become addicted to the model. And once you're addicted, you can't look back. One of the first math teachers I trained said, I'm just going to do this in Algebra 1 and then I'll do geometry next year. And she called me 2 weeks in and said, I'm doing it in everything and I'll just stay up late. So that's the only danger of it.
Thank you. There's a question about, can you explain to us how like the group work, how this model, we know, but how the model kind of can coincide with like PBL and all the other kind of great things?
Yeah, PBL or collaboration or both?
Both, yeah. How does students,
sure.
Time for collaboration and students and group work and all that kind of stuff?
Totally. I'll talk collaboration first and then PBL. PBL, it's like, it just works beautifully. Collaboration, sometimes people struggle with understanding the key components and then realize in action how it works quite smoothly. So we have a guide on this. We also have a 2-part podcast episode on collaboration. So I just want to stress that part. I'm going to summarize some of the key components now. First thing to understand is we break collaboration up into 2 buckets: organic collaboration and planned collaboration. So to me, frankly, the most powerful types of collaboration are organic collaboration. I'm a student, I'm struggling with a skill, I go seek someone out so that I can get support. Or I'm a student who's tackling a challenging task and I go seek a peer out to support me through that journey. That organic collaboration is beautifully facilitated through our model. And the reason why is suddenly students actually have data on who to go to. It used to drive me nuts as a teacher where I'd say, Tommy, go help Jessica on this assignment. And Tommy would be like, I don't know how to do it. Or Jessica would be like, Tommy, you can't help me. But in this model, I now have evidence that I can show the whole class that Tommy's mastered the skill. So Tommy can no longer say, I can't help you, because Tommy has proven to himself and me that he's actually a master at that particular skill. And the kids know that. So then kids can start to seek out the students in the classroom who've actually mastered the skill and get their support. So for organic collaboration, it actually gives even more just evidence to your students about who they should be reaching out to and why. On the planned collaboration front, I opened every single class with a discussion. Like literally every single one of them. Sometimes it would be on common revisions, so I kept seeing the same issues come up, so I'd say, hey everyone, let's talk about this. Sometimes it'd be about 21st century skills, how are folks using time effectively, why are folks falling behind, and all that good stuff. And sometimes I'd just say, hey, I'm gonna spiral something and do some sort of activity. For math, for science teachers, a lot of science teachers will do planned labs and say, hey, after 5 lessons, we're doing a lab. And they tell the students, you need to master these 5 lessons before Wednesday because we're doing a lab on that day, right? So you can create these really structured planned events, either at the beginning of class, end of class, or on a particular day on your unit, and they work quite beautifully. And kids are actually prepared for them because they've mastered the skills to be able to contribute to the discussion. So those are the variety of ways collaboration can work. On the PBL front, to be honest, I don't actually know how PBL doesn't work with the model, so it's sometimes hard for me to answer this question. There's a fantastic piece about this, but PBL was the only way I knew how to teach. So all my units were structured around a project. My favorite execution of PBL in our model is all the mastery checks contribute to the project at the end. So every mastery check of a lesson was actually a part of the final project. So when I was executing the model, right, if a project was to create a final report, a statistical report on a project, well, the first mastery check was maybe the thesis statement of that project. The second mastery check might have been the data tables that they actually had to infuse in that project. So PBL works really well, backwards mapping, all that good stuff.
There's a question about the mentors. So we know this, we can say yes, but are the mentors subject specific?
We have 83 mentors at the moment. So they span across grade levels, content areas. We have ESL mentors, special education mentors. What I can tell you is we have 1,300 teachers traveling through our mentorship program this summer. So is it going to be a perfect pairing every time? No, but we try to pair as closely as possible. And we will only grow our mentor base. And anyone on this call can one day become a mentor. Essentially, the way you become a mentor is you do the model. You don't have to go through the mentorship program. You just do the model, and then you submit a portfolio of work for our Distinguished Modern Classroom Educator credential. Once you've been credentialed in that way, then you can apply to be a mentor. All of our mentors get paid hourly to take on a caseload of teachers across the country and the world who learn the model. So we will try to pair you as closely as possible.
And Kareem, you got a hat trick. That's a hockey reference, by the way.
I know it.
You got a hat trick with ours because all 3 of our mentors were phenomenal and perfectly paired with us. So we can speak from experience. There's the HDSB specific question. So for HDSB teachers who tried this in the spring, did they implement it in just one subject, one unit, or strand?
Yeah, so I think what we saw, and that relates to another question that is also asking about homeroom teachers and teaching all subjects and how do you implement the model. So we saw essentially our educators starting small, trying with one small unit in one subject and trying it from there. So then maybe they tried it just in their geography if they were in grade 7, or just their math class for a week. So just really starting small, getting a feel for it, and you know, not feeling like they need to reinvent everything all at once. You know, like it does take a lot of front end work, and you just do it a little bit at a time and build your resources and go from there. And that's what we saw them doing. We
had one educator who actually switched to this mid-unit because she was so like, and said that her students, like, they don't want to do anything else in any other way. So, and she again started with little pieces because she was like, I'm mid-unit, but I want to try this. What do I do? And so she did little pieces at a time. There's a further technology question. Kareem, does this require one-to-one devices for students?
It's a good question. One-to-one, no. It does require enough laptops or devices in the classroom to be able to support the model. So I always say the best compliment I ever got was when Edutopia filmed my classroom and they asked me, is this actually a blended learning classroom? Because only 20% of students are actually using a device because we believe in lean tech. So we've seen teachers use this where about 50% of the number of students in the classroom they have devices for. So if it's a 25-person classroom, they have 12 devices in the room. That's not ideal. I did it with a laptop cart, which meant that kids didn't actually take the laptops home, but my classroom had the laptops. We are not a flipped model. We are very distinct from a flipped model. We do not require kids to go home, watch a video, then come into the classroom and do the same activity as all their peers based on that video. So all you need is to be able to empower kids at any time to watch a video in the classroom. And usually most kids are not all watching the same video at the same time. We also encourage splitters. Splitters are video, like just the headphone splitters. So two kids can watch the same video at once. So if it's the beginning of a unit, you can have two students and sometimes three students even all watching the same video at the same time. My students were so busy and like oftentimes had trouble making it to class. I mean, they were watching videos on their phone and on the bus. Like, you know, the way these tools work is you can watch them anywhere at any time.
We have time. We have about a minute and a half. So how do you translate the must do assignments skills, the should do and the aspire to do into marks? Is there a weighted point system where must do things are worth more? How does that work?
This is 1,000% teacher discretion. And I'm going to give you two examples that were literally what I was doing at the same time. I taught at my school an IB mathematics track, which was the most advanced math track at my school. And then I also taught a series of probability and statistics classes, which was filled with students, some of which were taking their 5th or 6th math because they loved math, and some students who were just like holding on to try to graduate. So in my IB class, those kids were all college bound, really wanted to perform highly. So I told them, if you only do the must-do lessons, you can't get higher than an 80% in my class. If you only do the should-dos, you can't get higher than a 90% in my class. And if you get it through everything, you can get up to 100% in my class. And the kids knew which ones were which. They knew lesson 7 was a must-do. They knew lesson 8 was an aspire to do. In the other class I taught, where the diversity of learning levels was so wide, I actually kept that information private. So I knew which lessons were must do, should do, and aspire to do. And if I went up to a kid and I said, look, I know you're going through a lot. You're excused for lesson 4. I removed that from the grade entirely. It was an excused in their grade book. So it didn't hurt them. So some kids, if they were only told to master 6 lessons, then they could get up to 100%, while a kid sitting right next to them maybe had to master 9. And if they only mastered 7, they got, a B or C. So that's how I did in my class. Teachers do it differently, and we do not prescribe a method for that.
One more question, Kareem. This was a common one in the pre-questions. What do you do about people who speed through, or vice versa, crawl through, both like in terms of motivation and just the pacing?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't worry about your kids speeding through, first of all. There's a million extension things they can be working on. And those kids oftentimes can work on self-directed programs. Like in my class, these kids were preparing for the SAT and ACT, which is the standardized test we use here. So I put them on Khan Academy and said, like, start mastering the skills because you want to, and they tend to lead the way on that front. For your students that are unmotivated, first of all, the number one way that you support unmotivated students is build relationships with them. And our model allows you to just spend a ton of one-on-one time. So do we have a special magic trick for kids that are really, really unmotivated and struggling? Certainly. And if I did, I'd probably be a millionaire. But what I can tell you is in our classrooms, kids actually have an on-ramp to success. So if a kid falls behind and is struggling, you can articulate to parent, to guardian, to them, hey, like you still have the opportunity to master all these skills. Like it's right here for you, versus just feeling like they have to give up. The second thing is you can always just pull them aside and spend time with them, tell them to come in after school. The learning isn't disappearing. And then lastly, you have such fantastic data on your students. So if something bigger is going on, where you need to loop in wraparound supports and counselors and mental health professionals, you actually have like concrete information. Like the students only mastered 2 out of 20 skills and they're really struggling. Can we look into this? Versus, hey, this kid has an F and they're struggling. Can you help me out? That isn't as compelling of just a rationale for why something bigger is going on. So I always say, like, you're going to have those students. They're usually going through a lot of challenging circumstances, and you'll have the information necessary to support them.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you so much for answering those questions. Don't leave yet. We've got some exciting stuff to share with you over the next few minutes. But we kind of just wanted to start with this quote because we know it's a lot of information tonight. Like you might be feeling overwhelmed. You might be feeling a bit unsure about how you're going to pull this off. You might still have a ton of questions. You might not know where to start, or if this is even going to work for you. So it's okay. As Arthur Ashe once said, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. So, and thanks to Sarah, in other words, you need to pace yourself.
Nice delivery.
Thank you. So really, like the sort of the moral of the story here is you don't need to do everything at once. You don't need to create all new resources. Look at what you already have. Start from there. Maybe just plan a single unit or a few lessons, or maybe even you're just taking the blended learning instruction piece of it and building in the other stuff as you go. We're here to help you and help support you. So like if you're really excited to begin this journey, you can feel free to reach out to any of us on the Shift team. Either email us or go through our calendars. They're always posted on the Shift and SPD happening docs, but we are here to support you on this journey.
All right, so here's perhaps your first taste of MCP framework. We've got some must-dos, should-dos, and aspire-to-dos for you. All right, so first up, we've got some amazing learning opportunities if you want to dive deeper into a modern classroom, and we've arranged them in the MCP style. First, you can sign up for the free MCP course. This is self-paced and it can be completed at any time. This is an absolute must to really learn deeply about the MCP framework. As we said earlier, we collaborated with MCP to create a tailored free course that reflects the needs of HDSB. You can register now and come back to it when you have the headspace to take it on. We realize it is the end of June. You register now and complete it when you have the headspace too. All right, so the free course link will be in the chat. Next, you can connect with Sarah, Rachel, and myself. If you want to brainstorm ideas, co-plan with us. Maybe you didn't get your question answered this evening and you had some follow-up questions. Get support around tech tools, whatever you need. We're here to support you. So if you'd like to connect with us, the link is also in the chat. And finally, as Kareem was mentioning earlier, the Facebook group, which is moderated by MCP and its mentors, is really an amazing resource and place for you to ask questions and collaborate with others from around the world. No question is too big or too small on there, and you always have lots of support from many voices. And it's you know that it's moderated by MCP mentors, so you know you're getting some good information as well. Also, be sure to check out their podcast. A new episode is released every Sunday and is packed with a really hands-on, great, useful tips and strategies for implementing your modern classroom. And they have episodes on elementary and secondary and collaborating, and so you can really dive into many aspects of the model. So the links for those are also in the chat.
And we have some super exciting news. So we are raffling off spots in the MCP Mentorship Program. So we'd love to send a sizable cohort through so that you're surrounded by others that are working through this at the same time and pays and to get to this in as many classrooms as possible. So it's impactful to student learning and teacher job satisfaction and personal satisfaction, as Kareem mentioned earlier. We went through it. It's so good. And what you get, as Kareem mentioned, is you get matched with a mentor, and they do a fabulous job of matching you up. You get classroom-ready resources. So anyone who is asking about resources, they're all in there. You get trackers, lessons, etc. You get access to a Slack channel. There are hundreds of people in Canada doing it. So we're creating a Slack channel just for the Canadian educators. This is a $500 US value. Like Kareem said, they're a nonprofit. This goes for the time of the mentors. And in order to be entered, all you have to do is fill out the quick feedback form. We really appreciate your thoughts and feedback. In completing the form, you're able to opt out of the draw, should you wish, but we'd still love your feedback if you're open and able to giving it to us. And we're also here, like Rachel said, we'd love to get into the weeds. We love being in the classroom and supporting you. We haven't been able to do that this year, so we are hungry to come in and collaborate with you and your learners with this model. And we're great collaborators if you're looking for someone to shoot ideas around with, or someone who's had a little bit of experience and practice with this, or whatever else you need. We're here. So the link to the feedback form is in the chat. Please click on that. We will be doing the draw for the people by tomorrow evening, right, shifters? Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, by tomorrow evening. And you could be going through the mentorship program with Kareem and his very talented and esteemed colleagues.
So with that, thank you so much, Kareem, for coming this evening. We really appreciate you taking the time to share with us this model that you started and that educators around the globe are using, adapting, and making their own. So thank you for coming.
Thank you all. Seriously, this group is such a fun group to be around. Not just the facilitators, but this whole entire group. I do a lot of presentations, and this one stands out as exciting. It's late, so to see so many educators committed to just learning and innovation, I just think it's incredibly inspiring. So thank you all for welcoming me. By the way, we also do like a lot of different things that pop up through our social media accounts. So if you do want to follow our social media accounts on Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that, it's at Modern Class Proj. So scholarships and stuff like that, new podcasts and things like that. But it has been an absolute joy to be here. So thank you all for setting this up, for giving me your time, and for just inspiring us. This is why we do the work, is just to be able to empower folks across the country and the world with the model. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for everyone coming out tonight and, you know, carving space in your evening and your brain, as Kareem said, to listen and consider and learn together. So let us know how we can support, and hope you got something from this evening.
And
have a great night.
If you do fill out that feedback form, the link to the slides is that you'll get that after you do the form. Forgot to mention that.
Thank you so much.
Thank guys.
You. Feel free to
Thanks,
unmute
everyone.
and say goodnight. Have a good night, everyone.
You so much.
7:59.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.